As a child, my immediate family were not actively religious, but we were taught that there was a God, and I grew up believing this. Things took a turn in my late teens. As a family, we'd faced a lot of difficulties, and I became extremely angry and frustrated with God, or God as I thought I knew him. I could never understand why he didn't intervene when my family needed him most. He seemed so distant and indifferent to our suffering. I was so furious with him that I actually sat down and wrote him an open letter, listing all the ways in which I thought he didn't deserve praise. I rejected him, not just by walking away, but essentially removing him from my life and slamming the door shut behind him. What followed was over 20 years of being lost in spiritual wilderness. I developed a chronic illness while at university, and despite 3 attempts to complete my degree, I had to quit as my body just couldn't keep up. My life ground to a halt and remained that way for a painfully long time. As well as the decline in my physical health, my mental health suffered too. I felt a complete failure with no sign of a future. It was the loneliest chapter of my life. Unable to face the reality of my situation, I took to distracting myself with YouTube and discovered the atheist movement. After years of filling my head with these ideas, something started stirring in me on an emotional level. Anytime I was out in nature, I found myself feeling awe and gratitude towards who or what. I wasn't sure. I thought there must be something bigger than us out there. I felt a calling towards it. Unfortunately, for a while, I channeled those feelings into the wrong things. My affinity with nature led to an interest in Wicca and other pagan ideas. I collected crystals, believed in spirit guides, and loved anything to do with the witchy aesthetic. In hindsight, I can see that all those ideas can appeal to our innate vanity, making us feel like we have powers that we don't. My ego didn't want me to admit that I might have been wrong about God. My shame didn't want me to admit it either. And deep down, I was afraid that if there was a God, he was probably very angry with me for the hateful things I used to think and feel about him. But the evidence for him just kept growing, not just on a personal level, but other wider evidence. Paying more attention to the news, it became obvious to me how dark and upside down everything is today. It also became obvious that evil is unfortunately a very real force, with a very real someone behind it. I thought that if the enemy exists, then it has to follow that the Saviour does too. It just has to. This changed everything for me. I yearned to know what it was all about and what I'd clearly got wrong. Fast forward to 2024, I found myself on an Alpha course. Even though I was convinced I'd ruined any chance of a personal relationship with God, I still wanted to learn about him. The first session put into words all the thoughts and feelings that had been rattling around inside me for so long, and I knew I'd made the right decision in signing up. After a couple of weeks, my group leaders encouraged me to try praying. It took a while to summon the nerve because I thought I'd be in for some kind of punishment from God, but nothing could have been further from the truth. I started by thanking him for Alpha, the weather. Then I started to open up about all the things I'd done. Immediately, all the shame, fear and guilt started to evaporate, and then I felt a tingling sensation on the top of my head, like someone had ever so gently put their hand upon it. I knew it was God reassuring me and saying, "I'm just glad you're here." Overwhelmed by his grace, I had to follow him. I gathered together all my crystals, New Age books and other paraphernalia and threw it all into a bin bag, making the firm decision to leave my old ways behind. It was time to read the Bible. However, I was reluctant at first. Having had all of these wonderful experiences, the cynic in me was afraid that doing so would burst the bubble. What if it was clearly all nonsense? Then I found a book in the library by Alistair McGrath called The Dawkins Delusion. It debunked the scientists' claims against the existence of God, and the more I read, it became clear that Dawkins actually doesn't seem to know much about the Bible for all his criticism of it. I realised I was basing my belief in the legitimacy of the Bible on human opinion, when what I should do is go straight to the source material. I started with the Gospel of John. I was moved to tears by these simple words from Jesus: "I know my sheep, and my sheep know me." It speaks of that knowing of the heart and shows his profound love for us. Turns out God is not indifferent to our suffering or any other facet of our lives. A lovely example of this is in the final chapter of John, when the resurrected Jesus offers Peter 3 opportunities to reaffirm his love for him after his previous betrayal. Jesus knew Peter's heart, and that's what mattered. His final words to Peter, "Follow me," again moved me in their beautiful simplicity. There's so much noise, confusion, and misleading information in this world that we sometimes lose the signal and cut ourselves off from God. Then we wonder why he doesn't seem to be receiving us. But if we resolutely set our focus on him, then it's amazing what happens. I've been floored by how quickly he got to work in my life. And in the space of a few months, I've gone from isolated and hopeless to being part of a community, meeting friends, and finally believing that there might actually be a future for me after all. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing.